welcome back to the My First Rodeo podcast, the show that talks to really cool, interesting, and famous people about the various firsts on their path to success. Today is no exception. We have the very funny, the very talented, the very successful Michael Palascak, stand-up comedian, I'd say road warrior, but also late-night TV warrior. He's been on all the late shows, all the shows that begin with the word late, it seems. But you know him from them. If you watch the late-night shows or if you've seen clips, very, very funny. His comedy is so perfect for that type of venue, that type of format. He's been on Colbert, he's been on Letterman, he's been on Leno, he's been on Corden, he's been on Craig Fergusson. He has his own half-hour comedy special. Actually, I think he has two, one on Dry Bar and one on Paramount Plus. And he was a finalist on Last Comic Standing. And just a funny guy doing it the right way and opening for some bigger acts, but filling up the comedy clubs, which is the work of a comic. And he does it so well, I've been able to see it up close because I got to MC for him at the Comedy Zone for 5 shows. And then he was kind enough to come back and do a show with me just last night, close to a sold-out crowd, for the Florida Innocence Project, a fundraiser to raise money to support the Florida Innocence Project. You may be familiar with the Innocence Projects. They are in, I think, just about every state, and actually they do work internationally as well. They help to get innocently or wrongfully convicted people exonerated through the legal process where there's been a mistake made. And they particularly came to fame after some of the scientific evidence advanced to a point where you could go back with DNA or forensic evidence and disprove convictions and, frankly, find who actually was the perpetrator. And they've done great work in that respect. It's not all scientific evidence. Sometimes there's just ineffective assistance of counsel or mistakes or rushes to judgment that are made. I serve on the board of the Florida Innocence Project, so I was excited to help put together this comedy show to raise money to support their efforts. They don't have a lot of funding, and so, if you have an Innocence Project in your market, certainly if you're in Florida, get to know the Florida Innocence Project, run by Seth Miller, who just does a terrific job. I think he's been doing it for close to 20 years. The whole team was out last night, and we had 7 exonerees there who had spent the combined total of hundreds of years in jail or prison for crimes that they didn't commit. Oftentimes crimes against loved ones of theirs, and so they didn't have time to mourn or grieve. Instead, they had to defend themselves and then ultimately convert to life in prison. And it was interesting as I reached out to raise money, as I tend to do for good causes, and it's usually, I wouldn't say easy, but a lot of pushback, I got to say. I have friends that are conservative. I have friends that are liberal. I don't really focus on that as much as I do on the dialogue and the issues and intelligent conversation and not being divisive. But people heard about getting wrongfully convicted people exonerated, and not a few of them thought that this was a liberal cause. And I guess you could see it that way. One might if they don't look hard. But obviously, the Constitution is what puts together these due process rights. The same Constitution that certain people use to support certain issues, whether it's the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, or whether it's other rights that they feel particularly fond of or strong about. And it surprised me that certain people pushed back or were less generous or didn't participate at all because they didn't see this as an issue that was important to them. And I can't imagine anything more important than protecting people that are wrongfully convicted. They didn't do the crime. There's not a liberal or conservative aspect of that. That's simply doing the right thing. And our system needs to work in order for us to stand behind it. And if somebody has been wrongfully convicted, then they shouldn't be in jail, shouldn't be in prison. In fact, the state's attorneys in lots of jurisdictions have integrity units that go back and look at convictions to see whether there's been mistakes made, and that is the work they should be doing. But Michael Palascak was in town for that purpose. He's in Kentucky today, so we're going to be interviewing him from there. He is just a nice guy. I don't think anybody has a bad thing to say about him. And he just tells jokes, writes jokes from a very intelligent perspective about things that are not divisive. They're very relatable. They're very authentic. He's the type of comedian I aspire to be, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from him. So this is me talking to Michael Palascak. Thanks for making time. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and you are a class act. You do it the way people should do it. So let's talk about your first rodeo. How'd you get started in what you're doing now?
My very first time on stage. So I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and
Wabash, right? Wabash.
Yeah. Wabash. You say like grandma and then bash.
Wabash. Got it.
So
the first electronic, lighted city in the U.S., right?
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's debated, but we have a sign that says it. So
has to be true.
So we lived there, and it was a small town, and I had brothers, and just normal kind of childhood that you'd have in a small town. I played a lot of sports. And then when I was in high school, my dad got a job. This is the podcast version of the story. This is the longer version.
That's okay. That's what it's all about.
Otherwise, it's like I wrote my name down and they called it. So then when I was like 16 or 17, my dad got a job in Joliet, and he started staying with my grandma, but we lived in Wabash so I could finish high school. And then the whole family moved when I was in college. And everyone was pretty sad kind of because we loved it. But I just had a sense of I thought it was going to be really good for some reason. And then when I went to college, I tried out for the baseball team, and it was Division I. And I always wanted to be an actor. And I think when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a comedian. And I remember thinking that a lot. And so it was the first time in my non-childhood where I had time to do whatever I wanted. So in college, I sort of started doing improv and stuff and acting. And then in the summer, my parents had moved to Chicago, and my aunt, my mom's sister, not my aunt, my mom's sister.
That would be an aunt, isn't it?
But not my mom is not my aunt. I was trying to be clear about that.
Fair enough.
She had a friend who used to work at Second City, as an improviser. I think he toured probably. Mm-hmm. And he was a screenwriter, and he had a great sort of job. He has a great job or life. And so I took classes that summer at Second City.
Oh, wow.
Because of what she said. I think that might've been the second summer. The first summer was just being there. But anyway, I think the summer where I started doing stand-up after my sophomore year of college, I was in a bookstore, because when you go home from college, usually you hang out with all your old friends or whatever, but I didn't have any friends, and that was fine. I mean, I had friends, but not old high school friends, just people who I had to work with or play baseball with. So I was at a bookstore hanging out, and I found a book on stand-up called Stand-Up Comedy, The Book, by Judy Carter.
Yeah.
And in the back of the book, it listed, this is how long ago it was, it listed open mics and places you could go up for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And I opened the book, and in the back of the book, there was one listed called Bill Brady's Comedy Capers. And it was literally probably 15 minutes away from where my parents had just moved to. And it wasn't a 21 and over bar or anything. So I read the book in June, and then I signed up at the end of June. I went up July 2nd, 2002.
Wow. And that was would you say Bill Brady's? Is that what it was?
Bill Brady's Barrel Laughs. I think it's called Bill Brady's Comedy Capers inside the Barrel Laughs Comedy Club.
And this is all in Chicago.
Yeah. It was Oak Lawn. So southwest suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah. So, you read the book and let's go back a little bit though. So you say you wanted to be a comedian. What was your first exposure to comedy as a young person?
Yeah. We lived in Buffalo, New York for 3.5 years. And I vividly remember that point in my life. I was age 4 to 7. And I remember one night we were all watching on TV, and this was in the 80s. So it was not a huge TV, but we all watched this ventriloquist, which to me, that was stand-up comedy.
Sure.
Because he had jokes, and we as a family just laughed so hard. And I'm a middle of 3. So I think I was never alone with my parents until like I was an adult and moved back home. So I really liked it when everyone got along. I liked it when everyone was happy. And I liked the attention of it. And so that was the first time I ever saw a stand-up comedian. And then growing up, my dad would always sort of revere comedians in the sense of like, he'd always say it's like the hardest job until you get the crowd going. It's just the hardest job. And he'd always ask for jokes at the dinner table. And I would get joke books and I would just start reading jokes and they would have to be like, all right, it's time to eat now. Like I started getting the light at an early age. That's what I would say.
2 jokes was the minimum or the maximum for you.
And so that was exactly. That was in Buffalo, New York. And then when we moved to Indiana, when I was 7, I was a new kid. And the only memory I have of that, thinking of being a comedian, was a teacher came into our classroom, like from another classroom. And one of like the kids in our class said something that was really funny. And that teacher said that he was going to be a comedian someday. And I remember thinking, no, that's going to be me. Cause my friend was funny, but I was like, and he could have been a comedian too, if he wanted, but I was like, that's when I first remember like thinking like the active desire to do it.
That's fascinating because you hear about a lot of people and maybe, you're a little younger than me, but the people that don't even know it's a job, but it sounds like from a very young age, you not only knew it was a job, you knew it was a hard job that your father respected.
Yeah. My dad's an accountant and my mom was a teacher until she had kids and stayed home with us. So yeah, but he called it a job all the time. And I think there's something too about like, so his dad was the first one, I think, to go to college. Like he worked in the steel mills or whatever. But then like my grandpa's dad told him, I don't know what that job is where like people walk into the building and don't have to go to the factory part, but you should do that job. Mm-hmm. So my grandpa like grew up, he like worked in the steel mill, but paid his way through college and became an accountant. And then my dad did that. Yeah, maybe a little more like on another level. And because he worked for like a private company or whatever. And then like not like a firm. And so I think there was this sense of like in my dad that he didn't take a risk like that, but he felt like if I got to, it would be pretty cool if I wanted to.
That's pretty neat. Now, is your dad, he appreciated jokes enough to say, hey guys, let's tell jokes at the table. Was he the guy at the family gatherings or cocktail parties that would make people laugh or try to make people laugh?
So my dad, I don't think has ever tried to make anybody laugh on purpose, but he's the funniest guy. Like my older brother is 3.5 years older and his college friends don't understand why I don't go on stage and just talk about my dad for an hour. Like they just like, he's the funniest. He's very excitable. He's got the energy of a puppy dog, but he's like, he's a 70-year-old man now. And he's very happy. And his like, when he texts you as if he's writing a letter back from World War II. Like it's very, very, and like if you're at home when they talk, my mom and dad will like go over the text message and they'll like they'll like pitch ideas on what to say in the text message. It's just like there's all these different intricacies or quirks or whatever that are very funny and nice in a pretty positive way. But he wasn't ever. I don't remember him being a big story. His dad, my grandpa, they'd always come over to celebrate birthdays and holidays, and he would just tell stories, and they'd always be entertaining to everybody, like to kids and adults. And I never remember him repeating any of them. Like he was just very, he was very good at that. And I think when he was a kid, like that being a comedian probably wasn't a job that he could ever imagine being a job. So it's not like he could ever thought about doing that really.
Right.
But maybe you could have. Yeah.
Yeah. So you grew up around at least that storytelling. And what I love about your humor and your jokes and your joke writing is, I don't know what you describe your style as, because to me, you're not long form stories, but you do tell stories. But there's a setup and punch about every, 20 seconds within them. So there's a lot of jokes within your jokes. I know that's the model that even a Chappelle's supposed to do, but a lot of people tell really long stories that have a great punchline.
Yeah.
The end is great, but you have so many punchlines along the way.
Yeah. I think that someday, I'd like to be at a place career-wise where you can have the audience's attention just because of who you are. Right. And you could take the time to go on a story like that. But I don't think I ever want to do that. I think the job of the comedian is to make them laugh as much as possible in the way that you think is funny. And I think stories and like or what evolves into a story, or like the funny idea of something happening can inspire or leads to the joke, but all the things that you find in between, that's, in my opinion, the job.
Oh yeah.
It's not, we're not writing movies, we're not writing TV shows, we're not writing novels. It's not about story. It's about just jokes. And for me, the more you can hide it in a story, then the more the audience is going to be surprised, and the more they're going to laugh. Like, I feel like a lot of my act relies on the audience being surprised by something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was listening last night, and I mean, it's, I don't know if you were mapping it out. It was like a wave. Like, you say something funny very early on, you get them laughing, you give them a story, a journey they're going on. And that may take 10 minutes, 5 minutes. I don't know how long your usual bits are, but within that, then there's just this wave. And of course, you got like a chorus of people laughing over here, and then a chorus of people laughing over there, and then they come together for a bigger laugh. And it's just really admirable to listen to.
Thank you. When I started, Mitch Hedberg was like the hottest comedian that everybody loved, and he was very much set a punch. And like everybody, when I started in the suburbs, it was all like, these are jokes to make people. This is how you sort of make money as a comedian, by making people laugh. And then you go into the city, and it got a little more freer with everything. But I first remember, I guess Cosby did, but I never put it together. But I remember listening to Mulaney's album and just seeing like how he would take a story and find a lot of jokes in it. And then Kumail was in Chicago when I was there too, and he was saying something about when he moved to New York, if you could just have something kind of funny to say at the beginning, then that could sort of build, rather than feeling the pressure to like kill on the first line.
Right.
It could lead to that line. And so I think I took all of that and the experience, and I was like, well, if I just keep doing this joke, I think I can find stuff to make it funny. And if I don't, then I just drop it. And that's sort of been the process.
So do you, and I do want to get back to the beginning, but in terms of the evolution, do you, is it a combination of writing jokes and then working it out on stage? That's your creation process?
That's a good question. I just recorded like a kind of a special a couple months ago. So I think it's going to go back to like sitting down and thinking about stuff more, because I really like that. Like, I know like Seinfeld talks about sitting down for an hour, and everyone talks about the pain of writing, but I really enjoy just the time putting into the work of it. I feel like grateful to have that time, and that this is my job. And so I think that'll happen more. But the process for when I started, it was like I did a ton of free writing. And then my friend Tommy Jonigan really loved free writing. So I would free write, and then I go back and try to find jokes from it. And then that was just kind of how I do it, unless I thought of something or was a tweet or something. And then when the pandemic happened, I had time to just like sort of really sit with everything. So I like had like little Post-it notes that I would like post on paper on my wall. And I would like try to think of stuff like an hour every day. I would go like an hour for a week, and then an hour, 5 minutes for a week, and an hour, 10 minutes for a week, as long as I linked them all together. And that was like a process. And then that was in the beginning of the pandemic. And then it got to the point where I was starting to work more, and I just kind of trusted that I would find stuff to fill in, and it kind of all sort of happened that way. And I waited a long time. Like it was 4 years between recordings, so I had a lot of time. And I don't think, I think it's fine. But yeah, so I think I trust a lot more that I'll just have an idea and just think about it and let it come to me. But I do like sitting and writing too. So I think it's both.
Do you feel comfortable on stage? I mean, you had at least some background in improv. Do you feel comfortable creating on stage, or do you like to have it pretty locked down by the time you get on stage?
When I started, I definitely wanted to know where the funny part was. And I don't think it's like, I think the background in improv helps with like acting and maybe writing scripts and stuff, and like feeling comfortable if I have something to go with it. But I feel like I have a lot of respect for the audience and the craft, so I try if I'm going to do that, I'll do that maybe like once in a set. And if it goes well, then I know that I have the freedom to do it again. But I don't really go off without knowing where I'm going, unless you can feel it when it's funny. Like when you come up with something on stage and it's going to work, you can feel it.
Right.
And so I'll always let myself do that, but I don't necessarily be like there's some guys I've heard that just like, I don't have anything, I'm just going to talk. And I say respect in the sense of like that they wouldn't, I think they probably have respect for it too. I just feel like, yeah, I just want to know where I'm going.
Yeah, I don't have the courage to do that. Obviously, I don't have the experience that you do, but yeah, I mean, obviously, there's riffs and things that come up that you don't expect, but
I would say it's not even like a lack of courage on your part or anybody's part. I think it's just like a sense of this is how I want to do the job.
right.
And I think that's got its own sort of courage and respect that should be allotted towards that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I've read a lot of your reviews and certainly observed you a number of times, and then seen your work on TV and the specials. And you know, the common theme with the highest compliment for a comedian is authentic and relatable. That's and likable. You get all those, and it's a funny word, authentic, because obviously the audience knows you're not making it up there organically. But it is very authentic, even though you do, you know, what, 5, 6 shows a week.
Yeah. Well, I always, I mean, there were a lot of people who I really liked starting out, and they really, and like when I got to do Letterman, and Letterman's style of comedians he had on the show were very much like, you're not making up story, you know, you're not making up things to make people laugh. And so I kind of put that in as a rule early on that like everything I say is true.
Mm-hmm.
And like my response is like on stage to the situation might be like, oh, this is something I thought of later, but it's all rooted in these things that really happen and who I really am. And that became sort of the goal, to be someone that I just want to be like your friend that that's funny to you in this moment.
Yeah. No, that
because
comes
I think like that's what I like when I watch stand up.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think I told you the first time I met you that my role models, my heroes, the ones I like to try to emulate, are Dimitri Martin, Mitch Hedberg, and Stephen Wright, and you. But put you all in that same class of you know, a lot of short. Shorter. Obviously, each of them are all shorter. Yours, as I was mentioning earlier, are short setup and punches within a longer narrative.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Dimitri in a while, but he was always short, and the other two for sure. And I feel like, I mean, that's what's great about comedy. You get to do whatever you wanted to do. Like I remember Mike Birbiglia started doing like the 1-person shows and stuff, and it got like everything got longer. And but I always thought he was really good when he just did his like normal stand up too. And so I was like, if I can just bring the sort of like two things together, then I think that'd be something I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's like people are all a part of a thing, but also they don't feel like they're missing out on the short jokes as long as you can get them in there a lot.
Right. I like that a lot. I want to go back to something you said out of curiosity, because you said you like making people laugh, like making people laugh at the dinner table. But I know you talk about your parents. Your parents still together, as best I can tell.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But decent, typical Midwestern upbringing. I mean.
Yeah. We were, you know, a small town. My mom's stayed home with us, and then we moved around a little. So that was something. Catholic. We go to church.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's fun. My older brother's 3 kids and is married. My younger brother's married. My parents have been married. I think their 50th is this year. I shouldn't say I think. I know it is.
You should know. Yeah, probably you can get those 50th cards, I think.
That's a big one. Yeah, I should probably get that.
That's probably a good idea.
So yeah, they were great. Like I felt like we grew up kind of when I was little in like suburbs of big cities like Cleveland and Buffalo kind of. And then we moved to a small town. So I felt like we were treated, we had a little different parenting style than all my friends did. Like I think my parents were a little more strict just because of the way they were raised, and also growing up in a big city, I felt like they were a little stricter than like my friends who grew up in the small town. They took things a little more seriously, which, you know, that was just their style. And you sort of get your freedom back at some point, no matter what. So it was just a little more delayed.
Yeah, although you stayed at home for a while. That's a big part of a lot of your early comedy and even current. Yeah. So they lighten up when you at some point.
Oh, for sure. Once you turned 18, they were like literally like you can sort of. I'm sure if something had gotten crazy, they would have stepped in. But I lived at home for a long time, and I still like going back because I have like they say the TV show Friends was about like when your friends become your family. And I feel like during that point in my life, in my early 20s, for sure, my parents became my friends, which sounds weird, but they allowed me to do my dream. And like they traveled to see my first big like festivals and TV sets. And I got to share those big moments with them. And when you do become a comedian, which I didn't realize, and I don't know if a lot of people realize, that when you become a comedian, if you really like are working a lot or trying to do it a lot, what I loved about college is when you hit Friday, everything's done until Monday. You don't have anything to do that's scheduled. You can do homework or wherever you have to do, but it's not a big deal. But as a comedian, you lose that connection with the world of like, we're all on break right now. Like my free time is when everyone's at work, which is nice because the lines are shorter and all that stuff, no traffic, but you really do lose this connection to like the community of people going out and having fun in their 20s. And you can make, you can take time off or whatever. But because of that, I kind of like lost touch. And I wasn't living in a city at the time. So I was living with my parents and driving. So I kind of lost touch with like friends a lot, like not all the time, but like I had a friend in college that I hung out with sometimes. And my parents just sort of adapted around my schedule. And I shared a lot of like super fun moments with them.
That's pretty neat, especially since your dad admired comedians, and it must be pretty cool for him to see what you've become and are becoming.
I think so. I think they're just happy when their kids are happy. Like that was the other thing that helped. My older brother was also funny. Like he's way more outgoing than me. I think firstborns just tend to be because they have to, and not to make it about birth order, but he didn't really know what he wanted to do at college. So he became an engineer because he knew like that's like super hard. And, if you're going to pay money for college, then let's do it. But he was really sad as an engineer. And my parents were like, you don't have to do this. We can figure something out. And now my brother's a lawyer and he loves it.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Two hard professions.
Yeah. So then when I said I wanted to do something I wanted to do, it really opened the door for me because my mom was just like, at least he's happy. And so I think whenever they questioned, even to this day, how things are going to work out, that as parents, they're just like really happy when their children are happy, which I'm glad that they have that perspective. Cause I think it'd be really easy as a parent. Sure. You're happy when your kid's happy, but what are you going to do, for all this other stuff? No,
that's all right. I'm at that point. I still have one at home, but I have 4 who are, basically adults. And you definitely become more of a mentor at some point, and then just a friend. I mean, one of my kids is 29, and we're friends. Obviously I'm the parent one in the relationship, but a lot less parenting to do.
I mean, I'm friends with my 5-year-old, but that's because I'm not a very good parent. I'm a good parent. I feel like when they're super young, though, I don't know. He's in split households, so I'm very considerate of that. But I think at a certain age, he's going to sort of, and I think it's around now is when he's going to start understanding like that I might know what I'm talking about, or that he might not have a choice.
For a few minutes, for a few years, really.
For a few years, but when they're babies, they just don't care. And it sounds like when they're teenagers, they don't care. So I feel like I got a little window where I can like be like, no, this is what we're doing. And he might not be so loud I get kicked out of my apartment.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, the teen years are tough, as you probably remember from being one, but your kids do not think you're smart in those years at all.
I do feel like, and then maybe this is from a distance, but I feel like teenagers nowadays, and maybe it's because I grew up in the 90s when like there was this I think everything was like great for everybody in the 90s. So there was this sort of like the grunge music and everything. Like there was just emphasis on being sad and like kind of angry.
We had to create sadness.
Yeah. And like, I don't see that as much in the generation like, I don't hang out with the teenagers, but the ones that I like have cousins that are like, it seems like they're happier. And I think it's because like times have kind of sucked a little bit for them with stuff that I never had to go through. So they're just sort of like, they're a little jollier. And it's while they probably still go through their teenage stuff, I think it feels like they like people more than when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think they value relationships more. That's for sure.
They're nicer to each other. It just seems like they're smarter and cooler. Like not like cooler in the sense of like, oh, they're going to be good people sooner.
Yeah, I don't be wrong. I'm pretty sure my kids would not have been friends with me. Like I would not have been cool enough to hang out with my own children. I'm still not, actually, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I was asking about making people laugh, because I mean, you are a nice person, and you're Midwestern, so I think it's legally required that you're nice. Yeah. And I feel like I went into comedy and even told jokes as a kid to sort of keep the peace in the house, and in other tense situations, even as a lawyer, which is my day gig, I'll tell jokes to diffuse tension, which is it's a good tool, but it's also it's a big responsibility. I feel like you need to keep the peace in environments.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I don't think you should feel like you have that responsibility, but if you can put it in there, I think it's good. I used to get criticized a lot in a previous relationship because I was really good. I felt like it being funny when the other person was not in a funny place, and not in a mean way at all. Just overall, like, we're gonna not be so serious all the time because there's no reason to. And then you realize, like, oh, that can be like a tactic from a person just to not be nice to you. But I think because I'm a stand-up comedian, I think I really value the laugh on stage a lot because that's what I've crafted. And then I really value the laugh off stage where it's just like, I'm not trying to keep the peace. It's just, I'm so relaxed and comfortable that I get to be myself in this situation. And that's what makes people laugh. Like, I think about sometimes, I'm sure everybody has this, but like some of my, like, really, really happy moments growing up are around the dinner table where you're with people who know you more than anyone in the world, like your brothers or your family. And someone says something that's funny that gets a laugh. And then you say something that's funny that gets a bigger laugh. And then you think of a thing and everyone's like crying because of this inside joke, basically, that wouldn't ever make sense to anybody else. But everyone's crying. And then you think of something else to say that's even funnier and you can't even get it out because you're breathing and laughing so hard. And that's really, that's the only thing I think that beats doing a stand-up on stage is like that organic moment of like, we're all destroyed right now, but we just thought of something funnier that we can't even say because we can't get a breath yet. Like, that's so fun.
Yeah, that's well described. And I think, not just blowing smoke up your butt, that is what you create at the comedy club, because obviously it's one-sided. The audience is not adding to your jokes, but they are in their mind and maybe even at their table. You know, tapping the person next to them, you know, you do that, or I do that, or remember when, just that little bit of murmur that happens. And I feel like that's the wave that goes through the club when you're telling your jokes and building stories.
I remember I listened to a lot of interviews that Jerry Seinfeld does because he feels like he reveres stand-up so much and talks about it in a positive way. And he talked about early on, like in the 80s, maybe, about how, like, when you have a joke, your job is like, there's a cliff and there's a gap between you and like the cliffs, and your goal as a comedian is to make the gap wide enough so it's exciting and fun in the joke, but not too far that the audience misses it and falls into the chasm and dies. So like, you got to make it so like they can be like, add their own thing to it in their brain. Like, I never really thought about it like that, but when you leave the place for them to put themselves into it, their own thing, that's when it gets even better.
Yeah, you'd love for them to be on the way home talking about the joke and remember when he said this, and that's just like what your aunt did, and so forth.
Or whenever that thing comes up in their life, they just think about you forever.
Yeah. I think I heard somebody say once, and it's probably not just somebody, it's probably been said a lot, that, you know, like, you want people to leave and have a good time, but if they remember one of your jokes or a bunch of your jokes, but at least one, and it comes up again in their life, that's success, that they remember your bit.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would even say, I heard before, and I kind of find it in my life, and you probably notice this as a comedian, maybe it's just comedians, but I feel like when someone comes up and tells you, I like this joke, to me, it's never like the joke that when I was on stage killed the most, because someone told me, like, if people are really, really laughing, it's hard for them to remember it without the thing being reminded to them, like in their life or whatever. So that's just something too. Like, if you can get people to enjoy something so hard and then forget it, and then it come back around and then them have that same experience, is really fun.
Yeah, you're right about that. Sometimes it's the one they come, I really liked that joke, and you're like, it's funny because nobody seemed to be laughing at it. And
I feel like those are the people that are like I think it's funny, and I also want you to know that I'm a little better at having a sense of humor than those people.
Oh, I got you. It's a little,
like, I don't know,
virtue signaling.
They're right. Like, I have jokes that people consistently said, that's my favorite joke. And not to be like whatever, but those ended up in sets that I did for TV or whatever, and people did like those jokes. So it's not like they're wrong. It's just something, I feel like there's something between the difference between like an intellectual joke that relies on sort of logic, and then one that's just sort of like really relatable and emotional. And I value the emotional one a little more because I feel like you still need this to be the smart person, but you also connect on an emotional level that the person might not ever remember again. But I feel like it's like more of a roller coaster.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you go to college. What did you major in?
So I was undecided, which was not a positive thing in my dad's eyes, at least, because they had the theory, which I didn't I mean, I'm very lucky. Like my dad didn't want us to have student loan debt coming out of college. So we had to work every summer. Like I was in a factory and warehouse. Like I had real job. Like my older brother worked for an ice company where I got to drive around a truck all day. Like I had to like go to a factory where I'm on like people who were like doing this forever around hot metal. Like I worked real jobs to help pay for college. But my dad luckily was like able to also be like, you can throw that in and then don't worry about it. And so it's very lucky. But at the same time, that made him very invested in what I was studying. And so he was not happy that I was undecided. He was not happy. I was going to a liberal arts school, but also had a really good pre-med program that you could only take like real math classes if you're going into pre-med, and he wanted me pre-med. And I was like, that's not for me right now. So he was like very adamant that I got a minor in math just because my dad was like, you need to keep taking math. I took a lot of like science too. Like I didn't take organic, but I got all the way through UPhys. I didn't take organic chemistry, but I think he wanted me to, which is like the hardest class. But I ended up majoring in English. That was my
okay. Yeah. I think we may have had that because I did as well.
Which you did well, and you became a lawyer. That was like my dad's. I think he would tell himself is like, oh, he could be a lawyer still. Because when I was a freshman, I think he was like, what are you going to major in? I was like, well, philosophy, English, or physics. And he's like, well, you can't do philosophy or English. And I was like, all right. And I was going to major in physics. And then my RA was like, don't do that until you're sure. And then I went online and I found like a list of like famous English majors who were super successful. Like there was a Supreme Court Justice, Marty Schottenheimer, who coached the Browns in the 80s. And that was like, my dad like was a huge Browns fan from Cleveland. Chevy Chase, I think, was an English major. And my dad was like, the 70s SNL people were his people. So it was like, I sent him that email. I haven't found that list since. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it went. I am assuming it was real. I emailed it to him, and I think my mom had something to do with it, but they kind of just let me major in English when I decided it.
Well, you made your case.
And it was like very special because I joke about it, but part of me was like, if you go to school for something that leads to a job that costs money, people are going to expect you to do that thing. And if your heart's not in it, you're 22. Like, why go down this road at such a young age if you don't have to? Like, I get if you have a family or if you just have to give back right away so I didn't want to major into something I didn't want to do. And also, like, a lot of English majors became teachers. Like they would get a minor in education, and luckily that was never a thing. I was never required to do that. And I just kind of like, I thought about teaching, but it never like appealed to me the way that stand-up did. And so I found myself as a junior, senior in college. I think I declared as a sophomore or junior, taking a lot of like English classes. I took English because I wanted to read books that people wrote for like entertainment, but that I might not read on my own. That was like my main reason. I loved writing and reading and being creative. But I was taking these classes, and it was literally like just fun because there was no pressure to have any success at all. Cause it was literally, I'm just enjoying it. It was a very expensive book club in a way. And I also took the science classes, and those were hard in themselves, but also like when you're taking university physics and there's all these like people that are going to become like engineers or whatever taking it, like they need that class. And I'm just like, well, we'll see what happens. There was a very much like relaxed experience to my college education that I couldn't have planned, that I don't think a lot of people get if they're like trying to do well. I think you can sort of skate by it at any level, but it was very fun. And like my older brother's an engineer, and it was so hard that I don't think when it's that hard, you can really do that anyways. But I had a lot of fun. And the education part, not just like, oh, I'm hanging out in college.
So your one brother went from engineering to law. What's your other brother do?
My younger brother, he played football in college, and then he was something with business major, and he graduated, and he was working in inside sales for a steel company. Huh. And then he also started doing improv in Chicago.
Oh, really?
And he did this like really cool web series about fantasy football. That was like really cool.
That's pretty neat. Yeah, good. A lot of creatives, huh?
Yeah. My mom's side has a lot of like teachers and writers. And like I said, my dad's dad was like the most like, when I was in 7th grade, we had to do this like family tree thing. And I told my grandpa about it and the stories I needed. And he literally like typed out a lot of pages that he just gave me that I just turned in as like stories from his family. And they were all like was great.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're building chops sort of quietly while you're in college, maybe building that goal, but not necessarily announcing that comedy is what you're going to do.
Yeah, I kind of I did it during the summers between my sophomore year and junior year, and then junior year and senior year. Every like Wednesday until I turned 21, then I could do Wednesday, Thursday because you were old enough to go in. And I met some really good friends for life. How you do when you first start out. The people that are open mics become your people, and they were all a little bit ahead of me. And so they kind of really showed me everything that I would need to know to host and hopefully feature down the road. And we would like go out to eat afterwards, and we play like cards on Monday or whatever. So like I had a really good experience that way. And then when I was in college during the school year, I just sort of did like as much like play and as many plays or like sketches or whatever I could do. Or like we didn't really, YouTube wasn't really around back then, but we would shoot stuff just for fun sometimes. And so I did all that, but I knew like to do stand up, I kind of felt like you're gonna like I could have went to the club and brought college friends or whatever, but I just really didn't want to leave campus unless it was like with my friends for a fun thing. So I didn't really do stand up at all during the school year. I just kind of did my thing as a college student and tried to enjoy it and learn as much, I guess, as I could, or just do plays and stuff. And then when I finished college, that's when I listened to an interview Seinfeld did from like the 80s again, and he talked about doing it every night in New York. And I was like, that's just what I'll do in Chicago. And I went to the first open mic on Thursday when I first got home, and it got canceled because nobody showed up. So it was like, what a great way to start. And then I started going into the city on Monday, and someone gave me the Chicago Reader and showed me where all the open mics were. So I just started doing all of them. And then I just kept taking like acting and improv classes. And writing, and that was my life.
That's postgraduate. So that
was when I graduated college.
Working at that time, other than doing that?
No. So I had to work when I was paying for college, the part that I could pay. Yeah. But then when I graduated, I was pretty lucky. Like I said, like my mom made sure that I could major in English because she wanted me to be happy. But then when I finished school, my dad's like an accountant. So he was like very aware of money, and he was like, I was living at home, and I was driving a car that was like theirs into the city, and it's just eating. Like my only expense was really, I ate their food. I had no money off the top. So his theory was that I should just do this as much as I can.
Wow. That's supportive.
Just see where it goes. Yeah. And my mom kept being like, no, he needs to go get a job too. And he's just like, he would come down to see my plays in college. And I think he felt like, if I majored in English in college, and that's what that degree was for. So if you're going to go to school for accounting, you're not also going to work at a different job until you become so he was very supportive of that. And his overall belief in me, both of my parents, has eclipsed my own belief in myself multiple times, and even more to this day. And I think that's one of the biggest things I think that made a difference was like, I just lived at home and I wrote and did shows, and I didn't work at all. I just became a comedian.
Wow. That is great encouragement. So how many years do you do that? Living at home and going into the city? Yeah.
So, that was 2004, of May when I moved home. And then I started everything then. And then, in 2007, I think it was, I got my first, sort of like industry thing. Like Chicago at the time, there weren't a ton of like clubs. It was just Zanies. And then, and it was kind of the booker was never there at the time. It was just kind of a challenge to get spots, but I got hosting gigs on the road. At the time, like there was a condo in Appleton, Wisconsin. You host and you could stay in the condo. There was a little room with no door, just like shower curtain. And like, there was so you could like host on the road. I did that from 2004 to 2007. And then Comedy Central, they used to have a thing called, I forget what it was called, but Laugh Riots or something like that, was like a contest. And then they did one called Comedy Knockout or something, where it was like open mic fight. That's what it was. And I submitted a tape. Like that was right on the cusp of the internet. And I submitted a tape that luckily my friend, I think Vince Carone, shot for me from this like college show I did with a bunch of other comedians. And I got to do the showcase in Chicago. And that was in the summer of 2007. And that summer, there was like a funeral I went to and a wedding, and my mom has like a ton of cousins, and they all asked about my career because no one had really seen me at that point. And so I just told them about that show, and it was packed out. and like I did really well, and I won the Chicago round and got to go out to LA for that. And then also that summer, I had a friend named Jeb Cadwell. This is bouncing around a little bit. Who he made it a goal to like to do 300 sets in a year or whatever. So he knew where all the open mics were in Chicago. If you wanted to do an open mic, you go out Jeb Cadwell, and you go to poetry open mics and music open mics. So I started going to this music open mic where this lady who became my friend later named Stoley will let comics go up and do like 10 minutes or 8 minutes because like they weren't songs, so they could just do longer.
Sure.
And so I became friends with her, and she was doing a ton of colleges, and she was like, you should do colleges. And she got an agent to come out to see me in 2007. And then they started working with me in 2007. And then 2008 in the winter, I got a NACA, Northern Plains, which is like the best NACA ever. I was like an alternate. I got called up the day before it was happening, and I drove up from Chicago to Minnesota, and I did my set, and I got like that next year I did like 80 colleges.
And for our listeners, NACA is the Association for basically entertaining on college campuses, right?
Yeah. Every school has like a club that just plans all the events, and they all come to this region if you're in that area. And
they pay good money.
Yeah, colleges. Yeah, I mean, to me, it was great then. Like now, it's like It was a deal. But like, yeah, I was going from making, like hosting at clubs or maybe featuring, like $40 a show, or like if you're featuring 75 to 100 if you're lucky a show. So like a college is at least $1,000.
Yeah,
like that's where you're starting at.
Sure.
And the agent takes a cut and everything. And so I did that from 2008, and I kept living at home, but I was making a living. That's the first time I really had to pay tax. I mean, I did my taxes, or my dad did, but like I had to pay taxes from 2008. I bought a car, and I got a manager also that year at a really big company because I did this other showcase to go to Vegas, and there was no Aspen that year. That was kind of like Aspen. And so I got to do that, and I got to do Montreal out of that Vegas thing.
Oh, wow.
With my manager.
Okay.
And then I got to do live at Gotham that year. And so it was all started in 2008. And then I moved out to LA in January 2011.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just like at the time I was getting auditions for sitcoms and stuff. I was just putting them on tape, and my manager was like, it would be good to come out here. So I came out for a month, and I just stayed. And I think it was a good choice. I liked it a lot. I had really good, fun experiences auditioning and getting called back and stuff for things, and nothing ever hit. And I think I'm very appreciative of any work I get, but I think I became more conscious of like, oh, I could be a better actor, and that could help my stand up. I found out later.
Interesting. So what comes first then? All the beginnings of all your late night performances, or Last Comic Standing?
So all the late night stuff. So in 2000, probably like 10 or 2009, Eddie Brill was booking Letterman, and he would come through a city and work the club, and then the club would have a showcase for him. And the first time he came through, I didn't get on it. And the club booker was like, oh, you should have been on that. And I was like, well, that's not my call.
Right.
That's your call.
I agree.
So he gave me like a really good week, and I got to open for Kevin Hart. And that's when he was like, oh, you should have been on this show. And this is like when Kevin was still doing clubs. And Kevin like kind of got me my manager. He was really nice in a way. And then so Eddie was doing the show. So I got to do the next Eddie showcase. And he also had seen me in Montreal, and he just wasn't a big fan of my stuff. But I think kind of sometimes people just have that opinion because they have to see so many people that if they love what you do first, then how are they going to get you in with all these people, And I was pretty young at the time, like, because I remember, so Eddie saw me, and we would kind of go back and forth on sets, but he never approved anything. And then my manager found out, it was right when Leno was coming back after Conan had taken over, that Leno's people wanted sets. So my manager called me, and he was like, because I was like, I should do late night. I got to figure out how old I was, but I was like, these jokes work. I should do this. And so he called me. He's like, they want a tape. Can you send me something? So I was literally driving downtown to Zany's with a camera in my car just to do like a set on their new talent showcase on Mondays, which turned out to be like the best night to tape because it wasn't like an open mic. People knew they were going up, and they would invite their friends out. Right. And it was also like newer people. So their friends just loved every joke because they're like, we're so happy that you have jokes. And so I made my Leno tape there, and that was in 2010. and that was like in the spring of 2010, and they really liked it. And then I came out for a visit to LA in June, and they saw me at the Comedy Magic Club, and they were like, yeah, do all those jokes except the last one, because you don't need, like, it's too much time with the last joke, so just cut that one. And then they were really nice. They're like, it might be like 6 months, you know, just keep doing it and it'll be fine. And then before I left LA, like 2 days later, I was in my manager's office and he was on the phone and he's like, "Can you do July 8th?" And I'm like, "For what?" He's like, "The Tonight Show." I'm like, "Yeah, I can." It's always a yes. It's like, what are you talking about? So like,
wow.
I came back in a couple weeks and it was really nice. Like my parents and my brother came out and I did sets around town to warm up for it. And then like the guests were like Steve Carell and Jane Lynch, who at the time, like, it was like The Office and like, and Glee, and like, and Jay was the nicest. Like he gave me a watch before the show. He was doing like doing rehearsals, and he came over to me and said hi and was like, he just started giving me advice. He was like, he's like, if you think you're going too slow, just slow down even more. And he's like, if you have to start over, who cares? Just start over. And he was just like super nice. And then before my set, which I didn't know, he told the crowd, like, this is my first time and to really like enjoy my set. And I went out there and it felt like they thought it was my first time ever doing stand-up. Like they just like, it was a really hot crowd.
That's
and
sweet.
then after the show, he was like, "How'd you think it went?" And as a kid, I was like, "Oh, it was the best ever." But I was like, "Oh, I think it was okay." And then like we took pictures. He like invited my family down to take pictures. There was a guy in the crowd that came down because he thought I was like, "That's not my dad." That like some guy tried to take a picture with Jay Leno as my dad, and I'm like, "No, it's not him." So that was the best. And that was 2010. And then Eddie found out I did Letterman or Tonight Show, and he said in someone's radio interview that he was upset because he wanted me to do Letterman first. So we emailed him, and I was like, "I love Letter. I love your show. I really appreciate all the work you did." And so I sent him a set that I wasn't on the Tonight Show, and then I got booked there like 6 months later, which apparently never happens. Like I was like, I got to do like one after the other 6 months without being a name at all.
And you do the same thing then with Colbert and Corden, don't you? In the same year?
Yeah. That was that comes in bunches, I guess. And then, so I did those, and then I got to open for Fergusson one time, and I got to do Fergusson that way. And then the Conan booker had booked a festival that I got a lot of industry from. It was a contest that I won. And so I knew him, and I would send him sets, and I just had this like, this is what if people are like wanting to know late night. One thing I did was like, I had a booker who liked my set, but I had a joke that was new or different. And instead of sending them a new set, I would just send them like a new 1 minute joke. Cause I think they get so many emails, but they don't want to see the same thing over and over again because they already said they liked it. And he was like, "Oh, that's a good joke. Also, here are the rest of the jokes I like." And then in a month I was on Conan. And then I used that tape because I had done Last Comic the year before, but I didn't get on TV at all. And I went to the rap party because they invited me, and the lady was like, "Oh, we'll put you on next year." But I never got a call. Like I auditioned, never heard from anybody. And so I emailed the producer like the week before they were taping, because I heard I was doing a show in Cleveland, and the feature was like, it was Dave Landau. It was really funny. And he had done the show the year before. And I was like, "Are they doing Last Comic?" He's like, "Yeah, I think so, but I'm not going to do it, I don't think." So I emailed the producer who I knew, or producer's assistant, and she was like, "Oh yeah, someone fell out, so you can come Friday if you want and do it." And so that's how I got to do Last Comic Standing, was kind of from my Conan set.
And that's when you were a finalist and then did a tour.
Finalist. Yeah, I already had a week booked at Zanies in Chicago that week, and my dad was going to come out with people from work to come see it on Friday, and they like doing that. So he was like, "I wouldn't do Last Comic Standing. It's not like good for you." But also the week before, my dad was driving me to the airport, and colleges had slowed down a little bit, and living in LA was like more expensive than living at home. He's like, "I don't know if you're going to be able to keep living there," because he does my taxes every year. And so I was like, "Oh, I have this Last Comic opportunity. I don't think I'm just not going to do this if I can't." So I kept my week at Zanies. Bert at Zanies was super nice. I did Thursday. I flew out Friday morning, and they found someone to fill in Friday. I was literally in my parents' house texting the person who ran like the comedians for Last Comic Standing, being like, "I don't know if I'll be there by 10 because it's a contest. You have to be there for the rules." But I'd been there the year before. So I was like, "I heard the rules." And she was like, "No, you have to be here. Otherwise you can't be here." And I was flying into LAX on a direct flight, so I didn't know how traffic was going to be. So I literally at 2 a.m. was like, "All right." I changed my flight to fly into Burbank. I left at 5 a.m. from Midway and got into Burbank at 9. I took a Uber over, did did the show or did the like whatever rules and then did the show, just tried to fall asleep in the green room, which the green room is like a lit stage. So it was kind of hard to do, but I was just like chilling out. Everyone's like trying to do bits because I think they felt like that would get you on the show. But I just sort of like literally tried to fall asleep the whole time. And, did my set, moved down to the next round, flew back to Chicago in the morning, did the Saturday, Sunday shows, flew back to LA, taped the show on Monday and Tuesday, or I think Tuesday was my first show, my second show. And then it was like a break for Easter. And then we came back and did the final 2 rounds the next week. And then it went on tour. Then it was like 5 months before it went out. And then we did like a 4 or 5 month tour.
It was you and 4 others or 5 others?
Yeah, me, Ian Bagg, Andy Erickson, Clayton English won, and Dominique Witten was also there.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Wow. I mean, that's a busy 10 years where your career really.
Yeah, you're right. It was a busy 10 years.
That's outstanding. Now, I mean, would you consider yourself a road dog at this point? I mean, you have a busy schedule. I was looking at it, and you're out every weekend.
Yeah, when I started, road dog was kind of like, I don't know, there's a comedian who kind of had that in his name, and he wasn't like someone everybody thought was really. So I feel like there's kind of a negative connotation in the sense that like you're just like your set isn't as original because you're doing it for money to make people laugh that isn't your audience. I got you. So I do work the road every week because I make a living. That's how I make a living. And it's the most, best of, it's a really good way for me to live. I don't act in TV shows. I don't write on shows. I haven't not tried to, it just hasn't worked out. So I'm a touring stand-up comedian. That's what I would say.
I like those words. That's better. Thank you for that, that corrective feedback. I could see that. And I would think your stuff would be so, I mean, the way you write is perfect for TV. Obviously there's limited number of opportunities, but I'm sure you'll get your chances there.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved to LA, it was probably like the time when no one was hiring anybody that I would fit into their thing that they were looking for. And if they did, they hired like a really good actor, if it was an acting role, or they hired people who just wrote, like they were just really good writers. Like when I did the Vegas festival, I met with a different manager, and it was like, the festival is like right after there's a writer's strike that was coming up. And this is like in 2008. And he was like, oh, if you'd done that set 5 years ago, you would have gotten a development deal, which would have been like, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And so just like in a couple of years, the industry had changed from like, we're going to give a lot of money to this one person to like, we're not doing that for people. So, and in that sense, like, I started taking acting classes in LA, and it made me better at that. And I wrote like a short that was really fun, and I came to value stand-up. Like those jobs are fantastic, but if you're making a really good, like you make a great living as a writer for TV and a great living as an actor, you're not going to go on the road. If you have a family, you can't be like, I'm going to go on the road now, unless you can really make a ton of money on the road and you're like, have a big name. You just can't. So I feel like stand up in the long run is way more than like just being a writer on a show. In every way, financially, all the places, with the control over your career you have. So I think in a weird way, like they always say, it might've worked out to have like some doors close and see what windows can open.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, doing what you do, it's very entrepreneurial. You sort of run your own business. And if you were to break away from your own business to go do something else, that may never see the light of day. That was the thing about a lot of those development deals. They paid you money, but oftentimes things just got shelved and you didn't get any fulfillment.
There's that make a living on selling movies that never get made.
Yeah.
Like, which is great. That's great that they get to live that way. But that's the perk that you get as a stand-up, is like you get to work for yourself. You get to see how your stuff works every night that you go out. And I think people have an attraction to the entrepreneurial spirit, like you were saying. Like people really respect when you're doing something on your own.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm sure there's tough days, but it doesn't seem like it's drudgery for you.
Everything I make is mine forever, especially now, like with YouTube. Like I have old specials and stuff that people get a cut of, but now like everything I make, like jokes that I write, I can do forever, whatever. And that's, I like it.
Yeah. Good. What a wonderful model you are for folks like me that are, featuring and so forth. I'm so impressed with what you do, and it should not go without being said that, work with a lot of headliners, and they're not all as nice and as kind and as encouraging as you are. So thanks for being a class act.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, me and Michael Palascak. What a class act. Just everything you expect from a Midwesterner. Not everything you expect from a stand-up comedian who's been doing it as long as he has, at the level he has. He really is a good guy, and I think that comes across certainly in his interactions with me and the folks that get to see him and work with him from city to city, but certainly the audience is. He's probably, I would say, from my observation, one of the funniest, best and even most successful in certain ways comedians that's not a household name. And of course there are people that follow him. He has a great following. The people that are coming to see him are his audience, but he's not filling up arenas or large theaters on a regular basis, but gosh, he's funny. And I'd love to see him get those opportunities. I don't know if that's even something that he thirsts for or wants. I'm sure he would welcome that type of success, but there's something about the comedians that work the 200 and 300 person rooms regularly that they're just really good at their craft. And when you hear the arena comics talking, they are nostalgic about working the smaller rooms, and of course they work the smaller rooms to get ready for touring and to get ready even for the arenas, because you can really tell how things are working in the small rooms. In the big room, it's weirder and more different, albeit more lucrative. You can certainly entertain a lot more people more quickly in a big room. But Michael does it as well as anybody, and I've seen a lot of them, and I've worked with a bunch of them, and he's just terrific. He's nice to the people that work there. He's great with the audience, and he's just pays attention to the craft. So glad you got a chance to hear about Michael Palascak. I'm glad you got a chance to see what it's like to be a touring comic, not a road dog. Glad he corrected me there. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you will share it with others. I hope you'll listen to some of the other episodes, and I hope that you'll come back and join us on My First Rodeo podcast.